All right, let's dive right in. Today we're looking at a completely fascinating and honestly terrifying set of recent releases from Theta Driven, published just this past week in late June 2026. This explainer essentially prosecutes the incumbent AI industry for negligence. We're going to unpack the real legal traps of agentic AI and why the current standard of care, which is basically just software watching software, is an absolute ticking time bomb for corporate officers. The overarching theme from this week's drop is clear. The ghost in the machine finally has coordinates, and that changes everything about your liability. To start, I really want you to ask yourself this critical, high-stakes boardroom question. If your newly deployed autonomous AI agent commits a massive, unrecoverable error right this second, who's footing the bill? You might instinctively think, well, the company absorbs it as a business loss, or maybe, oh, our insurance will step in. But as we'll see from the data, risk that lands on a company is just an abstraction. The real answer is far more personal, and it connects this problem directly to the exact executives who signed off on the deployment.
Now check out this quote from the Harvard Law School Corporate Governance Forum. It totally exposes the terrifying reality of your current directors and officers, or D&O, insurance. Basically, executives are flying blind. We are literally entering the Sarbanes-Oxley moment for AI, where saying, hey, I didn't know how the system worked, stops being a valid defense. In fact, it actually becomes the admission of guilt that triggers your penalty.
$237.5 million. That's not a theoretical number. That's the real-world cost of getting this wrong. That was the Boeing settlement cost. The board paid out $237.5 million to settle a claim, and here's the kicker. It wasn't because a director crashed an aircraft. It was because they completely failed their personal corporate oversight duty. The legal system didn't ask, was the decision wrong? They asked, show me the system that was watching. And when the answer is that no independent system exists, the legal hammer drops, and it drops hard.
Just look at how this legal noose has been tightening around individual corporate officers over the decades. Starting way back with the Caremark decision in 1996, boards were officially required to implement risk oversight. Jump to Marchand in 2019, and that duty became absolute for mission-critical risks. Crucially, in the 2023 McDonald's case, this liability expanded to bind all corporate officers, not just the directors. And now, the EU AI Act explicitly mandates independent oversight by natural persons. The magic word there is independent, meaning it has to live outside the failure domain of the AI itself.
Which brings us to how insurers are currently viewing this whole landscape. Look, nobody can currently measure what an AI agent actually did just by reading its own output logs. And because insurance carriers absolutely refuse to affirmatively cover what they cannot independently measure, they resort to what are called silent exclusions. The Insurance Services Office has filed endorsements like CG 4047 and 4048 to quietly but effectively write generative AI risk straight out of your standard liability forms. So, the exclusion is the liability. You're paying a premium for a policy that's deliberately silent on AI, leaving you totally exposed when a loss inevitably happens.
Now, you might be thinking, well, our liability is distributed across tons of vendors, the model provider, the orchestrator, the platform, the whole shebang. Actually, scratch that. Flipping that defense reveals that a complex vendor tangle is actually the plaintiff's Exhibit A against you. Diffusion of responsibility is not transfer of liability. Those vendor indemnities you signed, they cap out at your software fees and generally only cover copyright, not massive business losses. Worse, under the EU's Product Liability Directive, software is subject to strict liability. If you walk into court and hand a judge a messy spaghetti chart to explain why you couldn't trace a failure, you're just proving you deployed a mission-critical system with zero actual monitoring.
And this highlights the core technical failure of how we govern AI right now. Think about it. If your dashboard goes down or is compromised at the exact same time your AI is compromised, nobody is actually monitoring anything. You simply cannot satisfy a legal mandate for independent monitoring with a dashboard that the monitored agent is feeding data to itself. It's the literal equivalent of having the students grade their own homework. It's not a monitor, it's a co-conspirator.
So why can't we just write better software to watch the software? Well, we hit a literal mathematical wall here. Rice's theorem, which goes all the way back to 1953, mathematically proves that software cannot perfectly monitor the non-trivial semantics of other software. If you throw a large language model in the loop to judge the quality of another AI's work, it triggers an infinite recursion loop. Who checks the checker? Another checker? It goes on forever. In computer science, this undecidability is a known fact. A software model is mathematically forbidden from acting as an independent witness.
Then you throw Goodhart's law into the mix and you hit the second wall.
Goodhart's law dictates that the moment a metric becomes a target, it inevitably gets gamed. This is exactly why current AI oversight, using one chatbot to grade another chatbot, is just this uninsurable stochastic treadmill. You run the exact same input 3 times, and the evaluator gives you 3 completely different answers. That is not a control framework. That's a magic 8-ball with a system prompt.
When we line these two paradigms up side by side, the flaw is just glaring. The incumbent standard, software watching software, is entirely probabilistic. It's unverifiable, and ultimately it's completely uninsurable. The Theta Driven standard completely relocates the question. Instead of asking, was the AI's work good or ethical, which is inherently undecidable, it asks a much simpler question, did the AI stay in its assigned physical lane? In this world, in-lane beats ethics every time, because a strict, verifiable, deterministic hardware mandate is something you can actually ensure.
And here is the massive breakthrough that makes this possible. We have to go below the software stack entirely. The brilliant realization here is that semantic drift is actually physical drift. An agent that's authorized to parse a specific database leaves a highly specific, recomputable physical fingerprint on the silicon chip. When it hallucinates or when it wanders out of bounds, its physical execution path diverges. Competence isn't some arbitrary score, it's a physical shape. By measuring that physical shape right on the chip, you completely bypass that whole Turing-complete trap of software evaluating software. Okay, so how does this actually work in practice? It's a remarkably clean flow. First, a human-readable spec is published and compiled into a structured map for the chip, what they call a semantic lattice. Second, the AI executes its assigned task natively right on the hardware. Third, performance monitoring units, or PMUs, which are physical on-chip counters sitting way below the operating system, track that physical execution position. And finally, this generates a signed cryptographic receipt, a simple match or no-match verdict. It permanently seals the history of the AI's actions. You can't game it. You literally can't.
Because this technical output is purely deterministic, it translates directly into real financial stability metrics. These are what we call the Greeks of the competence pixel. You finally get to step off the machine learning evaluation rat race and stepped into true actuarial value. Just like the Black-Scholes model didn't touch the underlying stock, this doesn't touch the model. You can mathematically measure model risk, volatility, and zero tail risk. This essentially establishes the underlying derivatives market for autonomous execution.
Now, to really grasp the legal urgency of this, we need a quick history lesson. We have to tie this technical breakthrough back to a legendary 1932 legal precedent involving a case called the T.J. Hooper. 2 tugboats lost their barges in a brutal storm because they didn't carry weather radios. Now, the industry standard at the time was not to carry radios, so the owners argued, hey, we followed custom, but Judge Learned Hand ruled against them, dropping this absolute bombshell. Custom is not care. If a life-saving precaution is available, ignoring it is negligent, even if your entire industry ignores it.
Which leads us to what is probably the most dangerous realization for any exec watching this right now. The standard is what is available. Deterministic, hardware-grounded verification isn't science fiction. It is a free, available command you can run on your terminal today. Failing to use it, that's willful negligence. The very second an independent witness becomes available, relying on your old shared domain software monitor isn't just a bad idea, it becomes the literal, legally admissible evidence of your bad faith. So this introduces the new gold standard, the Hooper Standard Verification Ledger. And it requires 5 very specific things. 1, it has to be available today. 2, it must be deterministic. The gate has no amnesia. Same input always equals the exact same output. 3, it must be completely recomputed by an independent stranger. 4, it has to be hardware grounded via a physical silicon serial number, absolutely not an LLM's subjective opinion. And 5, it has to be tamper evident. This ledger gives you a cryptographic receipt that an underwriter can finally look at, trust, and most importantly, price.
At the end of the day, as a leader, you're looking down the barrel of 2 wildly different futures. First, you have the unmeasured organization. They're still relying on software evaluating software. They're going to be stuck in endless pilot purgatory, carrying terrifying, uninsurable tail risk, and actively exposing their C-suite to personal legal liability. On the flip side, you have the measured organization. They have cryptographic proof that their AI stays securely in its lane. That unlocks real, confident agentic deployments, enables actual priced AI insurance, and creates a frankly massive cost of capital advantage over everyone else.
And here's the genius of it. Once you hand this risk a truly decidable number, it completely unlocks the financial side. You get one ruler for 2 brand new markets.
Once that score is sealed and physically decidable, a market can finally hold it. This creates, first, an insurance premium priced exactly on how often an AI agent actually leaves its designated lane, and second, a variance swap priced on how turbulently it moves while operating securely inside that lane. That's it. That is exactly how you turn chaotic, unpredictable AI risk into a completely countable, underwritable frequency.
I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. It's the core question this entire body of research is forcing us to ask. Are you out of your pixel? Look, yesterday, not knowing was an excuse. You didn't know better. But today? Today, you are fully conscious that relying on a chatbot to monitor your autonomous agent is both uninsurable and totally legally indefensible. The hardware-backed radio is sitting right there on the shelf. The only question now is, will you be the one to install it, or is it going to be your name on the liability lawsuit when the storm finally hits?